right?
But I think what people do is they see that 100 grand, they're like, I need that new truck. I need that.
We have some lead flow. We have referrals. We got to get to them quick.
This is your baby. You've been working on this.
You're listening to the Roofing Success Podcast, a show created to inspire roofing contractors to achieve optimal success in their roofing businesses. I'm the host, Jim Aline, the co-author of the books Internet Marketing for Roofing Contractors and The Best Known Roofer. I'm also the co-founder of Roofer Marketers, the leading digital marketing agency for the roofing industry. On each episode, I sit down with industry leaders to talk about their processes, the lessons they've learned, and how to find success in roofing. Hey, welcome to another episode of the Roofing Success Podcast. Click those buttons, the likes, subscribes. I know all of you don't do it. I see the numbers. I see how many people download the episodes. I see how many followers we have. I know some of you haven't pressed those buttons. Please do so. Today I have my coworker on. What's up, Nick Pagnani? How are you doing today?
Heyo. Good. Happy
Awesome,
to be
man.
here.
Nick,
Excited.
Nick, what do you do at JobNimbus?
Yeah, I actually have a really cool job at JobNimbus. I'm a pro services consultant. So when people buy JobNimbus, our project management software, they can get onboarded through our traditional routes. We have tons of free resources for them to get going. But sometimes people aren't as techy, or they don't want that, or they want it set up in a hurry. So they can pay to engage with the pro services team, and either via Zoom, or I actually fly out to a lot of offices. I'll go spend a day, 2 days, 3 days in their office, learning who they are, understanding their process and flow, and then kind of building our system out for them. So I actually have a pretty fun thing, because I can see the country, but I can also go into all these different offices and see people from a $2 million roofing company just starting out to a $75 million roofing company with 9 divisions, and a board of directors who's really running it. So I see everything from where I was starting out as a general contractor a few years ago, like a chuck in a truck type of guy, to a really professional business. And I get to see all the different sides of it and give some best practices and set up their system in a way that makes it scalable and better.
And that's why I wanted to have you on. And I thought, I think you have, in a lot of our conversations and events that we do together and stuff like that, you have this unique perspective. The whole pro services team does, but you guys have this unique perspective. Contractors are trying to make their businesses more efficient. They're trying to get better, right? They're trying to improve their businesses, and you guys get this cool view of you're kind of an outsider looking in, but you actually get to see the real inner workings, right? A lot of times, people who are consulting, they get to see the inner workings, but I don't think they get to see as detailed, because you're on the CRM side, right? Because you're on the JobNimbus side, you can see how they're if they're even moving their job through the board, right? You can see if they are acting on the processes that they're saying that they have. And I think that's a real unique position. And like you mentioned, you get to see, companies from 2 million to 70 million to you get this wide view and all across the country. So I'm really excited to have this conversation today. And I think it's going to be very impactful for people. I feel like the first thing that you guys do in pro services is around process. But let's talk about your background first and how you got into your position here and into doing this for a living.
Yeah, I have a really weird story, I guess. So I grew up on the technical side. I'm in Utah. We have a lot of technology, a lot of SaaS companies here. My most recent job before JobNimbus, I was at an online e-learning school where they focus on medical training. And I started out in kind of a customer service role, and then they implemented Salesforce and said, we need somebody to run this. And being a little bit of a tech background, I was like, okay, I dig it. And so went to San Francisco, got certified, became a Salesforce administrator, and did a bunch of work that way, and really understood the processes and dug deep into that side of it, really understanding how the different parts of the business would work together, how they would talk together, how they'd share information. And then after leaving that's when I came to JobNimbus. And the reason I came there is because I worked with somebody at that previous company who said, Nick, this job's for you. The reason they wanted me to come here is because all this time I was kind of doing tech stuff. I started framing when I was 16. I started doing all the terrible jobs. My uncle's like, hey, we don't like you, so you're going to go pick up all these extra pieces of scraps. You're going to pick up all the bundles of shingles and take them back to the supplier. And so I started having that technical side, and I became a licensed contractor about 10 years ago in Utah. And I would do all this stuff nights, weekends, because I've got a family of 4, thinking about college, thinking about weddings. And while my job was great, it wasn't going to pay for this other stuff. So I'd moonlight as a contractor and, did a lot of the work myself, grew to a little bit where I had a couple of employees. COVID happened and I stopped working at that other place, built some homes, did some additions, decided to go full into the contracting and realized I loved it, but I also missed this technical side. So bringing us back full circle, Jared Ko, he's a sales rep at JobNimbus. He called me. He's like, man, you've got to come here. They have a new role that's designed for you because you need to be techie and you need to be able to understand what's going on in the industry. And you need to be able to talk to these people from a viewpoint of, oh, I've actually run a company, or I run into these problems, or I've had to fight with suppliers, or I've had to go back and, I had somebody come in and steal my entire crew. They paid them cash to leave, all my framers to leave a site to go frame their track homes. And those are things that you don't really get when you're doing, just regular training at college. They don't teach you how to handle that. So
That's right.
I was really excited to come to JobNimbus because it did marry those 2 skills and almost two lives that I had. Now I'm merging the tech side, merging it with my experience, and I just love it. And I love working with folks that are true and they're hardworking. And, I see all the shirts that are like dirty hands, clean money, and it just resonates in my heart because there's a lot of us that just grind it out and are trying to make it happen. And I just love working and serving that part of our community.
That's awesome, man. And it is like, it's kind of funny how where your path leads you, right? Like you would never think that like, oh man, I'm going to, all of this like side work through the years is going to end up being part of my, part of a reason that I was able to get this position in the future. And I love that. I love that. But when you guys go, like when you're preparing to work with a company, what are some of the first questions you're asking them to get an understanding of where they're at, what they need, things like that?
Yeah, killer question. And that's where we kind of do this discovery call in JobNimbus. But the things I need to say, who are you? Are you 2 million? Are you 5 million? Are you 10? Are you 20? Because those conversations are going to be way different. Are you doing, and again, I'm going to probably steer this more toward roofing, if that's okay. We serve other types. I've done a bunch of pool cages, a lot of construction, a lot of restoration companies. But really, if for roofing, we'll say, are you doing retail? Are you working with insurance companies? If you're doing insurance, what do your contingencies look like? What are your contracts? I try and just get a full scope of who they are. I want to know if you're doing, if you are a $10 million company, is 8 of it retail and 2 of it's insurance, or is that flipped? Because again, as I set up your process, I really need to understand where your heavy efforts are going to be. And then I try and get some more basic stuff like how comfortable are you with technology? Would you do automations? Are you coming from pen and paper? Which, even though it's 2024, I still think a third or maybe even 40% of our companies are coming from pen and paper. And so this is their first dance with some sort of formal CRM. And I need to understand what they're comfortable doing that way. I also ask about their crews, right? Are you guys 1099ing? You W-2ing? There's some legal stuff that comes up and implications with that. Also trying to figure out if they're doing service work as like lead generation. Somebody's got a leak, are they calling you? Or is that not what you're interested in? Because that does change the flow a little bit as well. And then I need to understand, who's running what department. Because for me, like I said, big processes guy, do I have a sales manager? Do I have a production manager? Do I have somebody over billing? Or are we not at that level yet? Is it the owner doing multiple hats? Or have I got a division just for permitting? And that helps me understand what needs to be built out, what kind of visibility we need, and how fast they're going to move.
This leads me to a couple of questions. What do you see at that 2 million, 5 million, kind of 10 plus million? What are the differences? Because I always talk, we're over 200 of these in, talked to a lot of contractors. Most of them are 3 million plus that I've talked to on this program or have been in business for a long time. And, but it seems like there's a conversation in the roofing community, especially with private equity right now, that I've been hearing more, right? So that kind of 0 to 2, you're almost self-employed, right? If we want to frame it that way, you're almost self-employed.
Proving the concept, you're
Proving the
doing the grind.
concept. That's a great way to put it. Then in that 2 to 5, you're learning how to hire, maybe, right? And then that 5 to 10, there's another gap there in leadership and process and all of that. And then at 10 plus, it's true, having true leaders in your company that take and run with things. What are some of the biggest issues you see? Let's start with that $2 million contract. Or what are some of the biggest things that, like, man, if you fix this, it'll get you to 5 faster?
Yeah, good question. And really, there's a couple of things that kind of tie together. You mentioned hiring and trust. This is your baby. You've been working on this. You built it. It's feeding you. It's feeding your kids. To bring somebody on that's of value, that's going to cost you some money. And so I've got to say, if I'm going to give this guy 50, 60, 80 grand, whatever that is, I've got to trust them to run my business. And I got to be able to let go of trying to do all the things. And that's super hard because you've been nurturing this thing. You've been grinding it out. You've been the late nights, the weekends while everybody else is at the pool or at the lake, and you're sitting there like, oh, I'm putting on another roof, where I'm there ensuring each step of the way. Quality subs is another one, consistent subs, making sure that you're hiring them, because when you're first starting out, you're trying to get cheap. So you're nickel and diming. You're trying to fight with them on their pricing. I noticed that when you get a little bit bigger, you're okay paying a little bit more because you don't want them to leave. You want to have somebody that you can rely on, somebody that you can trust. I pay a little bit more per square on my roofing crew than I normally should, but I know that I'll never have a problem with them answering the phone. I don't do a ton. I'm not a full-time anymore. So I'm like, okay, I just need to know that you're going to take care of it. And that's worth paying you a little bit more. And understanding that all the documentation, my master agreement is set up correctly. And then every time I do a work order, it's referencing that master agreement so that I'm in the clear and I'm covering my bases from a legal perspective, from a tax perspective, from an employment perspective, because I don't want to mess with that at any point in the road. The other thing that happens is really organization and getting your new leads in. A lot of these guys are like, they'll work off referrals. They'll be the bottom price guy. They'll just try and do anything they do to drum up business. And they have to really understand that there's a lot of different ways to get leads, to get new customers, to get referrals, or to buy leads. And all that takes money and it takes investment. So again, you're scraping, you're grinding, you're working this little thing, it's growing, and now you're ready. But you've got to come into phase 2 of the grind, which is putting more resources out there and having to change your flow.
I've had a couple of these conversations recently, and I'm going down this rabbit hole, but I was listening to a podcast. I can't remember which podcast it was recently, but they were talking about investing in your business. And and if you have a mindset of investment versus like, man, this is going to cost me. So I want to run through this with everyone. So if let's look at an investment, right? Like the stock market, will say, performs at about 10% a year, right? The stock market performs at about 10% a year. So if you're going to invest money in your business, you want to beat what you could do in the stock market, because you could take that money and put it in the stock market, get your 10%, right? Right now, you could just stick it in a savings account and get 4.5%, 5% because of, the way interest rates are right now. So instead, I don't think we think about reinvesting in our business the same way that we do investing in a stock or a mutual fund or our bank account. And so in those early days, it's like, man, what am I doing with this money? So let's say you have, $100,000 in profit, and you go, okay, well, if I could invest 50,000 of this, I need to beat the stock market, right? So I need to, next year, I need $55,000 to come back to me from that $50,000 investment. Man, I tell you, in business, that's not a tough thing to do. Right.
Right. Like, I think what people do is they see that 100 grand. They're like, I need that new truck. I need wraps. I need to get a new thing.
Yeah. And it's a tough mental thing to overcome, but hopefully that's helpful for people to start, shifting the mindset a little bit. I had this conversation on a Roofing and Solar Reform Alliance call recently where, we were just talking about that, man. Like, and then there's another aspect to it, and that's the enterprise value of your business. So the enterprise value of your business, everyone knows, like you hear, all these business owners, Bill Gates and, all these guys, their their net worth is X amount of dollars, right? Bill Gates is worth 50 billion or whatever it is. That's not cash in his bank account. That's the net worth of his stock in Microsoft, right? So you as the business owner, your net worth is in your business. So that's what we refer to as enterprise value. So if your business is worth zero, you have zero enterprise value, right? But if you could take that business and sell it for $500,000, you have $500,000 of enterprise value. If you could sell it, to a private equity firm for 5 million or 10 million or something down the road or now, depending on where you're at in your journey, your enterprise value is that. So if you invested $1 million in your business, I'm going to write $1 million in your business, and 5 years from now, a private equity company would give you $10 million for that business. Boy, that's a heck of a return on investment, right? And so it's a little bit of a tangent that I went on there, Nick, but I think it's important for people to understand that, right? But it starts with all of the foundational things. If you're the Marcus Lemonis, the prophet, people, process and what is it? People, process, and product, right? Product. Or something like that, right?
Yeah.
And so, like, you have your people. You said, like, good crews, right? Do you have a production manager, a sales manager? Who are the key roles in your, and then your product is roofing, right? That's your product. So getting your people, process, and product. You talked about leads. So I see this as a big challenge, especially early on.
Yeah.
A lot of times I don't think new owners or that $2 million owner treats that lead with the right intentionality. Like, every time your phone rings, my goodness, man, that is money in the bank. Yeah. But people don't treat it that way. They miss those calls. They don't call back fast enough. They let them go on to another company. What do you see in that kind of in that lead stage and the, asking for referrals? That was kind of the first thing that you got to when you started talking about those younger companies.
Yeah. I appreciate the tangent, by the way. That makes me think about a few different things, and it's always starting with the end in mind. Yeah. Because a lot of people will start a company to provide, but then some will say, I'm starting a company because I want to sell it. That's right. I want to bring on some money, or I want to grow it. They want to do this thing. So understanding who you are and what your intention is, I think, is really important. In pro services, we always say working on your business versus working in your business.
Yep.
And a lot of people are working in their business because there's just not enough time or they don't understand. That sort of concept is a working on your business type of mentality. And if you can make your switch, that's going to get you over those humps a little bit faster and a little bit easier because you're understanding how those things happen. And I'll just touch on one more of this before I jump over to the lead thing you were talking about. Understanding how to read financials, understanding that your business does have financial documents, understanding how to read a profit and loss statement, or learning, even if here's homework for everybody. If you don't know what EBITDA is, go look up EBITDA and understand what that is for your company. Understand those numbers, know how to read a P&L. Please, please, please. It'll change your world if you are trying to grow. Now, reverting back, sorry, I'll go on that tangent all day long.
That's a good one.
But leads are really, really important. And there's a lot of ways to get leads, and there's a lot of really bad ways to get leads. The first one, everybody's like, oh, I'll just go do a job because somebody heard I was doing it. I'm going to be on Facebook. Somebody, an auntie called me up and said, can you come take care of this for me? Hey, do you know anybody else? Great. You start growing. I went down kind of a bad road where I started paying for leads. I was like, okay, I got to do some marketing, but I don't know anything about marketing. So these guys say they'll get me leads. You pay a certain amount of money for leads in your area. Those same leads are being sold to 10, 20 other contractors. If you're not there with a great price within 30 seconds to a minute, you just paid a lot of money and nothing really happened, or you paid for somebody else to get that. So you kind of have to determine who you are, what your business flow is, and how those leads are going to come into you. There's absolutely nothing wrong with wrapping your truck or doing yard signs. But for me, I'm asking every single time and I'm asking a lot, right? If I've done work for a customer, as soon as I sign a contract, throughout the process, I'm like, hey, this is great. We're about 50% done with yours. I'm looking to line up the next one. Do you have anybody like yourself? Can you help me with this? And people just are either afraid to have that conversation, or they're too busy, or they don't understand that referrals close at what, 30, 25% versus a lead I'm going to buy online that might be
way more.
half, or
referrals might close
way
at
more,
like 80%. Yeah. Like it's,
yeah.
and then the leads online might close at that 25, 30%. So I think you just flipped there, but like, it's like it's the business that's right in front of you that you're just leaving.
Yes.
Right. I always say the contractors that I know that are the most successful are the best at turning one into many, is the way I like to frame that. Right. Like, and that's that ask. That's making sure that everyone that already knows you, already likes you, and already trusts you, right? Making sure that all of them know what you do, right? And then from there, when you get a customer and they know you, they like you, they trust you. Now you're asking, like, I love where like this is exactly the right thing for people to do, but they miss it.
They miss it. And when a lot of people, when I go work with them, they're like, can JobNimbus automate this request for me? Sure. Yeah, it can. And it should. But if that's your only time asking, you're doing this whole thing wrong.
Yeah.
One yes can multiply to lots of yeses really easily. But if you're waiting for just an automated text to go out that said, hey, we did your roof, could you give us somebody in your neighborhood? Yeah, that's fine. That's what everybody's doing. You should be saying, hey, I really appreciated working with you. Our business runs on referrals. That's okay to say. There's no pride thing in that. There's no thing that says, yeah, I'm a $50 million company. Can you please help me out? No, please help me out. Please, please, please. Give me somebody like you. Give me a neighbor. Give me somebody. I provided you with an amazing product. I'm glad you brought up the profit because, when you talk about Marcus, he drives those three things home. And hopefully you're putting on a really good product, because a bad one will cost you not only in having to redo it, not only in the loss of referrals, but it's gonna put a tarnish on your reputation. We're in the world of Google 5-star review, Amazon shopping. And if you have some blemishes and you can't respond to them, and I say that, and I'm going to jump into that a little bit too, if you can't respond to them in a good, meaningful way, you can kind of throw a lot of that business away. And it's a really hard hurdle to come back and overcome. Like I always freak out when I see, a 500 5-star, no blemish reviews, right? That always says, wow, this company either has a really good reputation management company, or they're paying, or whatever it is. I don't mind seeing a couple of bad reviews as long as I see the owner responding, working things out, trying to work it, because no person alive thinks that every customer is your amazing customer. They recognize that people are wild or crazy, and sometimes you're not going to make them happy. Even if you do the most perfect job, someone's going to be frustrated about something. But if you're getting those reviews and you're responding to them and you're showing that you're the type of owner who cares and is intentional about it, that's even more business. So I'm okay with that. Yeah. But again, use technology to ask for reviews. Absolutely. That's table stakes. It's 2024. We're now trying to think about AI and how these other things are affecting our business. If you're only relying on a text message to get your Google star review, you're doing it wrong. You got to be asking early, often, and later.
I talk about that all the time. And I learned this as it was actually one of my first guests on the podcast, Adam Butorf down in he's in the DFW area. And they start asking they start to seed the ask for a review. They seed the review ask on the inspection, on the appointment set. Yeah. That's how early they're like, hey, just so you know, we want to make sure that people know that we do quality work. If we do a good job for you, will you be willing to leave us a review on Google? And then they ask again at the inspection and at the contract signing and at the, on the day of the build and after like they're seeding the ask the whole way to get it in someone's mind that this is what you want to do. We want there's a balance here, right? Of what do we let technology take off of our plate, and what do we still need to do? Where do we use technology to complement? Right. So not to take something off of our plate, but to complement what we're already doing. And I think that's, if we're using it, especially in the lead flow, right, in that beginning process, but even along the way, we talk about this too, like through production and how many times can you contact a homeowner who has not signed with you, right? Like before they get annoyed. Not many. How many times can you contact a homeowner who is under contract with you that you are updating on the process of their job? As many times, like a lot, right? Before they get annoyed. They feel more comfortable with you the more you communicate with them. When they're in the sales process, if you call them 5 times a day, hey, did you make that decision yet? Hey, did you make that's a different thing, right? So let's talk about process a little bit. Mm-hmm. We have some lead flow. We have referrals. We got to get to them quick. I like what you said. If you're going to be spending money, if you're going to be investing in your marketing, make sure that you can manage that lead flow. Make sure that someone's answering the phone, you're communicating quickly, you're setting inspect. Like you got to be on that quickly, or it's a lot of wasted money. Let's talk about process now. I think that's something that you guys get to see. Like get that real overhead viewpoint on, and what are some of the challenges that you see in a lot of process, from that lead coming in all the way through the invoicing or even through collections, I guess.
Yeah, this is probably the hardest part, but the most important part, right? If I'm going to build a home, I got to pour my concrete just right because everything else is going to be framed on top of it. When I go in, I have these conversations, and it's really interesting because if I go back to that saying, work on your business versus working in your business, a lot of these folks they're busy. They're working in their business. They're pushing, they're driving, they're delivering, all those different things. But when they're paying for somebody to come and sit down with them, now they're taking a step back and they're looking at their business and they go, oh, I need to document this. And I'm like, okay, you can't have 95 steps in your process. That's too long. You can have a lot of tasks, but your milestones or your key statuses, you want to think if a customer calls me and says, hey, what's up with my job? I don't want to say, oh, you're in administrative review 2.5. like, oh, what we're doing is we're doing our material order, or we're just validating all of our materials. Like there's a lot of different ways you would say it. And so I see people who try and list out every possible step along the way. And I say, all right, let's shoot for 15. Let's shoot for 20, because 20 I can manage, or 15 I can manage in my mind. Now, as I grow, I might have 50 statuses, or I might have 70 statuses. But as the owner, I'm not trying to manage all those. I've got a team. Okay, I've got my sales guy who's got these 8 processes. I got my production person who has these 12 or 15. And then I have my billing who has this. Now I have accountability. Now I have scalability, because I can put the right person to be over that specific thing. But honestly, it's keep it simple. It doesn't have to be super crazy. I know $30, $40 million roofing companies who have 20 statuses, because it doesn't have to be that crazy. Now, there are tasks. I've got to file for my permit. I've got to submit. If you're in Florida, you got tons of stuff. You got to do your notice of commitments, all these different documents that nobody else has to deal with. Or if you're in different parts of the country, maybe there's unions that you have to work with, or there's different pricing things. Or in California, you have different legal rules, contract, collections. And so I'm okay having those different steps or those different tasks, but understanding there is a difference between status and milestone versus a task. The other thing that gets kind of crazy is people say, oh, you can auto task somebody. Well, let me have them do this. And now as a worker, I'm like, ding, 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 ding. I don't need to be told to get up, to walk to the file cabinet, pull out the file, fill out this paper and put it in. Just give me a permitting task and I'll handle the permitting. But because, again, these people are taking that step back, they're trying to see it from 30,000 feet, and they're saying, okay, now I'm going to work on my business. It's too much, and it goes super deep. So I try and reel them back a little bit and say, let's start with 20. We can expand it more. We can dive in deeper. I need to know where your biggest pain points are. Where do you need the extra visibility? And we'll set up a couple extra things around that, but we don't have to make it this big, exhaustive process. I hate to say this, and hopefully nobody gets offended. It's not that hard, right? We go out, we do the sale, we get the sale, we order the materials, we put on the materials, we deal with any permitting stuff, we bill, right? You could boil it down to 7 steps. Most people need more than that, but it doesn't have to be this crazy drawn out process, because that doesn't scale. And you're spending more time grooming your backlog or updating cards or moving statuses than you are of actually moving the work along. So you just got to make sure that you're keeping it clean and keeping it scalable. What are some of the questions that an owner can ask themselves, or even a production manager, a sales manager?
what questions can they ask themselves to get to that, to get down to those necessary stages, like the ones that are most impactful in the process?
Yeah. Yeah. I would say I always say boil it down, right? Everybody knows that. You got something, you got to get that stock tasting really good. So you put it on your stove and boil it down. That's what you got to do with your business. Because again, you could have 1,000 different ingredients. What are the most important things that needs to happen? I always say, look at your frustration points. Are you missing delivery dates? Are you missing permitting, or do you have to, you have everything ready to go, but you didn't have the right crew, where are you finding friction? And let's solve those first. Honestly, I think that understanding the difference between, okay, if I've got step one and I want to go to step two, what are the three things I have to do? Those are the tasks that move me to step two. And I always like to say, you know what, let's kind of use a past tense things. Like instead of saying order materials, like sign contract is, I'm going to go into JobNimbus terminology, if that's all right. So normally I see signed contract, and then I see order materials or permitting. Well, what do I have to go from signed contract to materials ordered? Well, I got to order the materials. I got to do my site survey. I got to ensure I have my color meeting. Those are my tasks that happen before I do this next step. So if you think about it okay, I'm going to stop everything. I'm going to throw it all out the window. I'm going to go on a whiteboard and say, I've got 15 steps, or I've got 20 steps. What are they? And you just write down the big ones, and then you can fill in the different tasks. Even that exercise alone will help you understand that you have a process. And as you're thinking and moving and shaking, you don't take that time to do it. But as an owner of a business, you should do that. And that will also help not only your process, but now if you're intentional, you can map out a customer journey. Jim, you brought up a really good point about a customer will never be mad at you for talking to them lots of different times. So if I have, my sales process, I'm going to talk to them, new lead, I'm going to text them, I'm going to call them, I'm going to email them. But then I go through all that and I get the contract. Yay, success. Balloons are flying everywhere in the office. Now, what is my customer experience through production? We do this all day, every day. We understand what it takes. We understand timelines. Customers have no idea that they have to pull their car out of the driveway, or they have to lock up their dog, or that sometimes a picture will fall off a wall. I need to inform them. I need to coach them. I need to tell them. And the more you can include a customer in that journey or that experience, the better they're going to feel about you. So that when we ask for the review, they're going to go, oh, Jim was great. He told me every step of the way what was going on. There was never any weirdness. There was never any vagueness. It was never, they collected my first check. I gave him $5,000. I didn't hear from him for 6 weeks. It was, oh yeah, he got my first check. The next day I had an email. 2 days after that, I had a text. Then I got my material delivery date. Then I got this thing saying, holy crap, I've got to clean up my yard, or they're going to drag a magnet around to pick up stuff that they don't even think about. And it really helps them feel like they're part of the process. These folks are giving you 5, 10, 20, 30 grand for an average roof size. And if they don't feel like they're getting a lot of value out of it, because when they're done, it's okay, my roof's good. The value is the relationship. The value is you, and the value is the way that you made them feel. So that's how you deliver that, I think. And then, like I said, so you map it out. That leads to the customer journey and that experience, and that's what leads to the best way you can grow your business.
Yeah, that customer journey. I love that. I heard it phrased once in customer service versus customer experience. And man, that one hit with me. A customer service is reactionary. So customer service is reactionary. You're responding to what the customer is throwing at you. A customer experience is intentional. So if you've probably heard me say this in some of my talks and things like that, but if your customer is wondering, you're losing, right? So just a simple thing like that, if you are making sure that you're communicating with them and you've stepped back, you whiteboarded all of those stages and steps, you have your tasks, but then in creating a customer journey out of it, now you also add in not just the tasks that you and your team have to do, but also the communication rhythm with the customer. My goodness.
Yeah.
You are top 1%. Would you agree?
And you can use technology to do a lot of it. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. That's the number one thing. And we talk about it at our crew events at JobNimbus when people come in, that most people, the biggest complaint, I think Lowe's did a big report on it, if I remember right. The biggest frustration they have in the construction or the service community is they just don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
Even a picture, right? If you're doing a remodel, send them a picture once a week or every couple of days if they're not on site. Hey, here's what we got done, or here's some updates, or we're waiting on a permit. Just, we'll keep you posted once it gets approved.
That's right.
Great. I love it. I love you. You're my favorite person ever.
You are now my favorite person ever.
And
yeah. That communication is so important. And I like it. Keep it simple, right? Just keep it simple. Mm-hmm. Just boil it down to the major milestones, and then the tasks and communication that go within those milestones. That alone, just doing that exercise is going to make your business 10 times better overnight, because you've become intentional. You have an understanding of your business and of the flow of your business. What else can you do from a communication standpoint? I'm always talking about the communication with the customer, but you see the internal team communication also. How do you, what are some tips and tricks about getting that internal communication within the team in sync?
Yeah, that's huge, right? Because what happens is, if you think paper and pen, you've got your folder and people start putting sticky notes, or they write on the folder, or they highlight this thing, you must know this. Having a way to at least get all that information into one system, whatever CRM or whatever technology you use, have a consistent method that you're either going to have a naming convention for how we name our jobs. We're going to have a way that we log certain information in the right order, or information that we're like, hey, I have to know this. Make that top end point up there. There's a lot of ways that you can do that. In JobNimbus, we have like notes, we have tags. You can mention somebody, hey, Jim, don't forget to do this thing. Or we have note types where you say, okay, this is a permitting thing. This is required to be there. So if I search for permits, all my notes on this customer are going to come up about the permits. And it's really important that whatever system you use, right? I always say, if it's not in JobNimbus, it didn't happen. And if you touch a job, you leave a note. If I can ingrain those two things into your brain, whenever I do a training, you're going to be like 90% ahead. Because what happens, we have emails, then I have to go look at my text thread. Then I have to look at was it this group text or was it that group text? Was it the leadership one? I know John was on it, but I can't remember which one. Like, just put it in one spot in a consistent, scalable way, because I don't want to search. I don't want to, if I'm on vacation, don't call me for what color the drip edge is. It's in the note. Don't call me for, hey, did we do X, Y, and Z? Because I want to go and I want to be in Cancun scuba diving. I don't want to be answering texts about what's going on with X, Y, or Z. And so if you can find a way to do that in your company, if you can say whatever your source of truth is, that every time you touch a job, you leave a note. And if it's not in that CRM, if it's not in JobNimbus, it didn't happen. It just has to be that way, because we spend so much time spinning our wheels going through, even before this podcast started, Jim, you and I, how many emails do you have?
That's right.
Right?
It's crazy.
I've got personal, I've got my job, I've got my side job. There's so many crazy things where I'm like, where is this info? If it relates to the job, put it in the CRM.
That's great advice. And then it creates visibility to everyone involved. Right. And I think that's the one of our clients and a friend of mine, Nick Pagnani with Hero Roofing. I just love the way that he structured this, and that they actually did a customer journey mapping exercise in their company. And, you think about it from the customer experience, but one of the things that he talked about was that it made his internal communication more impactful. Everyone knew what they needed to do and who needed to do what, when, and, and how, right? And so just mapping this, going through the process, having it all dialed in. If it doesn't happen in the CRM, it didn't happen. Make notes.
Yep.
If someone can't go back later and see what happened and have an understanding without a conversation, right? That would be the goal, right? Like to be able to see what they need to see without having a conversation, without having to understand. I would say that's the ultimate goal. But that's a challenge.
Jim, I put one more.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I put one more twist on there too. Heaven forbid you go to legal, right? Or you've got a lien. This is now your pedigree. This is what happened. If I can go in and judge says, hey, this person, is not going to pay you the $30,000. You can say, but look at all this stuff that I have. Yes, they are. I did my part. I provided value. I did meaningful progress. Now I can have that conversation because I've got that proof. I don't want to do that. I don't want to rely on that, but I'm a CYA. Jake Dempsey's, he's a belt and suspenders type of guy. I'm the same way. So I want to make sure that I'm covered start to finish every which way this could go.
That's right. Yeah. I went into years ago on a rehab that I was doing. I went into mediation with one of my subs, and they were not happy, and they were, trying to get money for stuff that they didn't do, and or that I was going to have to fix. And I walked in there and I had like 350 pictures, every email they sent me, every text message that we had, the date and time of every phone call, and not what was said on the phone call. I didn't have recordings or anything like that, but like, and the attorney that was doing the mediation like giggled and like, he was like, he went into the other room and told them, yeah, guys, I don't think you have much of a chance here. Like, and it's just, and that wasn't organized in a CRM or anything like that. That was just me just like collecting all of the documentation for all the contracts that we had signed, all the different things. And it was, it's crazy. Let's get back to earlier. We were talking about that 2 million, 5 million, 10 million.
Yeah.
I think that something that happens along the way, like in those early stages, you're just trying to get business, and you'll take a job for less than you probably should sometimes, right?
Yeah.
But then you get to a point where, man, I have to hire some people. Now I have to pay for some people. Now you're starting to understand why your competitor has that margin. And then you get up into the 10, maybe the 8 figures, and you go, wow, now we have all these trucks, we have all this equipment, we have this shop, we have mechanics, we have this, we have that, we have a yard, we have admin people, we have layers of, and we have a huge marketing budget. Now there's this other, aspect to the business that you just don't have in those early stages. I think I've heard you talk about it maybe like as the pricing life cycle. Is that how I've heard you before?
Yeah, I think so. And I don't know if that's like an official term, but that's a Nickism, so we'll stick with it. Yeah, it's good, right? Because you're right. You start out young and you're like, I've got to win a bid. I've got to get business because I need to feed my family. I need to do this thing. I've got to pay my bills. And so you do whatever you can to win a job. Oh, here it's, $15,000. Well, I might have somebody else. Oh, they bid you 12. Well, guess what? I'll do it for 10. Great. You just paid $500 to do that roof for the pleasure of doing it. Like, no, it's a race to the bottom. And even when you're young, you have overhead and profit. You don't understand, but maybe you don't understand how to calculate it, right? You don't understand that there is a cost to buying those leads or the referrals or the time or the gas. A lot of people put no value on their time when they're first starting out, which I get because you have to. You don't pay yourself. You just pay yourself at the end. There's been a lot of times where you do things and you're like, man, I am not making any money on this, or the numbers, I should have made a ton. But then you go back and you job costing, realizing that, no, I didn't. You're going to put on a good product. You're going to provide some value, but the price isn't the value. The value is that you did a good thing. You did it the right way and you took care of the customer. And that's okay if that costs a little bit more. And sometimes if you're a professional, you've been doing this, that knowledge and experience means something. And I always tell like this stupid story, and you guys have probably all heard this, so I apologize if I bore you, but there's always the story of the plumber. And the plumber goes to someone's house. She calls him up, says, this isn't working. And he goes in and he hits a pipe with a wrench or whatever, right? He does a simple thing, charges the lady $300. She's like, there's no way I would pay you $300 to hit a pipe with $300. So he's like, oh, okay, I get it. So he goes back, rewrites her an invoice, and it says $5 for hitting a pipe, $300 or $295 for knowing where to hit, right? That means something. And while you might be doing something simple, if you go in and patch a roof, it's not really that hard, but knowing how to do it so that it won't leak again, that's worth some money. And so understanding that your experience, that your knowledge, the value that you're providing is okay. There's always somebody who's going to say like, oh, I can't afford you. Well, maybe that's okay. Maybe you can't. And I don't want to like offend anybody who's always looking for the cheapest price, who's always looking for the bottom value. That if that's the way you run, that's a-okay. But for me, I'm not always going to be the right solution for every single person. I want to be, and I want to win you, but I'm not going to do it at a cost. I'm not going to do it for free, and I'm not going to do it for 2% margin. Just because I understand that to run my business, I need more than that. And there'll always be people who again, race to the bottom because they're trying to do it cheaper, free, or better. But there's got to be a point, and this is kind of those hurdle things, that 2 to 5, where you start saying, I'm not doing it for less than 20 points or 22 points at the end. I've got to start out at 55 to get down to my 22 at the end. Knowing what that actually costs and what your individual O&P is for your business is really going to drive you to making good financial decisions or good pricing decisions. And so that's kind of that's why I call it the life cycle, because you start out and then you realize, crap, I'm an idiot. Or when you go back and you have a free minute and you start doing the numbers, you start job costing and go, yeah, I made $300 for 3 weeks worth of work. That's not okay. And so as you grow, you get out of being the low cost guy. You get out of, I'm going to do everything I can to get every single job. I'm going to get every good job that fits within me. And I don't want to offend any customers, but sometimes I'm not always the right fit because I'm going to do a better job than these other folks. I'm going to provide a better value, but that costs. The knowledge on knowing where to hit the pipe does cost a little bit more. And that's okay. Don't be afraid of that.
That's a big one. We undervalue our knowledge. Just put it simply, we undervalue our knowledge. I've heard this a very similar story. An engineer works at a factory for years. He designed all the conveyor belts and the process, and he retires, and they have a problem, and so they call him in to consult, and he comes in and he's there for 5 minutes, and he sends him a bill for $10,000. And they're like, $10,000? You're here for 5 minutes. But it was the same kind of concept. Like, yeah, I'm charging you, three, and you only turned one wrench or whatever it was, right? You turned one bolt, and that, and it was like, yeah, $10 for turning the bolt, $9,990 for knowing which bolt to turn, right? Like it's the same concept. Don't undervalue your knowledge. But then I think on the other side of it, and this was kind of down, you'd mentioned it earlier, in understanding and learning how to read P&Ls, understanding cash flow, understanding margins. Those are things that are so impactful. I had someone on the podcast before that their first hire was a fractional CFO. And I was like, what? That's not, and I mean, it wasn't a hire, I guess, right? It was a consultant role or whatever, right. But like, this is the first thing you put money into is a fractional CFO. Like, this is a crazy thing. But his thought process was, man, if I can really understand these numbers, it's going to help me grow. And so you guys, like I said, you get to see from, these leads coming in all the way through production, and then invoicing and collections and AR, and like I love the vantage point that you guys get. So let's talk about cash flow a little bit. What are some things, some struggles that you see in companies or in terms of their cash flow, and then what are some solutions that you see companies putting into place that help to solve those problems?
Yeah, this is the hardest thing, right? I think they say that 2/3, and again, I don't know percents. Most businesses go out within their first couple of years, and I would probably attribute it to cash flow. And again, I'm going to go to roofing just because it's an easy example. If I'm going to put on say it's a $20,000 roof, I might have $7,000 in materials, then I've got my labor, right? In some states, California, you can only collect 10% or $1,000 up front. That's it. That's what you're limited to. So luckily we don't have that in Utah or other places. But now I'm financing that job for them, right? I'm the bank. You can't be a bank and scale. So you have to make sure that you have the resources up front to handle it or to grow or to do it the right way. Getting your LLC set up early, make sure it's set up correctly if it's an LLC or S Corp or however you do your business. But getting something set up and then start building that business credit ASAP, day one, whatever you have to do to get that to start to work for you, because I guarantee you're going to run and hit against a wall. Once you start bidding out 20, 30 jobs and you win 20, 30 jobs, Well, now you got to pay for 20, 30 roofs, or you got to pay for 20, 30 bundles of materials. Whatever that cost is, it adds up and it's really hard. And then I see some people go down like the hard money road because they don't have the pedigree set up where they can go get loans, or they don't have some sort of investment, or they don't have a partner, or whatever it is, however you're setting up your business. But you have to understand that you have to have some capital to run a business, because those things can stack up quick. If you're in a storm area and all of a sudden you have 400 roofs and you're doing insurance can be 120, 160 days from start to finish till you get a check, which is crazy. But I've heard all the horror stories. And so you got to decide, if I am an insurance company, I've got to supplement with some cash deals so I can get some money coming in to pay for these. Or I've got to have really good terms. I need to go talk to my supplier. Or some people bounce from supplier to supplier to supplier to ensure that they can get all that material supplied. One of the things that not a lot of people think about is they don't think about financing. It sounds scary. I don't want to be a payment guy, or people would rather just do this, or you know what? More and more people are offering financing up front. It's paying for the job. They're getting maybe their 80% or their 75% up front, and then they get the last little bit at the end. It really allows you to not have to worry about, how am I going to pay for this bundle, or how am I going to pay for this drop? And if you can kind of understand that while you're doing, 10 roofs a week or 5 roofs a week, it maybe isn't that big a deal, but you want to start playing with the big boys and 5, 10, 15, 20 million, that adds up. You're going to be spending a ton of money at your suppliers every single week, every single month. That bill's going to come due. They'll cut you off at some point. So you got to have some sort of plan or strategy in place. The other thing I see is people, while they're growing, is they spend their money kind of bad. And I love it when I see a roofer show up. If I go and because somebody will say, hey, I need a roof on Facebook. And I'm like, okay, they're in my neighborhood. I'll go bid them out. I go over there and I pull up in my 7-year-old Dodge Ram 1500. It's not anything beautiful. It's white. It doesn't have air conditioning seats for all you contractors out there. So you can see the struggle that I'm in. But I see some dude roll up in his brand new AT4 HD 1-ton, lifted up, and I'm like, sweet, he's got a lot of overhead. He's going to be in trouble. I can come in and give a fair price. Maybe he's doing great. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. But spend your money wisely. Invest in your business that's going to make sense. You talked at the very beginning about, okay, I'm going to invest $1 million. How much have I got to get back? I'm looking for more than 10%. What is that truck really going to give me as a return? What is buying X, Y, and Z really going to give me as a return? Can I continue renting out dumpsters, or do I need to buy my own cans? Well, probably not at the beginning. You don't need to have that business going. That's a whole nother business that just people do. Or if you're like, oh, I'm paying a ton for siding guys, I'm just going to start a siding business. That's a whole business that people do. So make sure you've got this sorted, this is clear, this is grown, and this is scalable before you do this other stuff. And again, a lot of the things that you think you need to have, a lot of the things that are minor inconvenience, they can wait. Wait till you're solidified. Wait till you have you are clearing $100,000 in profit each year or more before you start investing in niceties, right? Because those bills are going to come due. Those things are going to come up. And don't be afraid, again, to offer financing. Don't be afraid to, if it's allowable in your area, to take progress payments. Progress payments are okay. I need 10% or 15% just to get on my schedule. Then when my materials drop, I need half, and then I need the other half when the roof's done. That's okay. So just make sure that those are set up clear with your customers, and that you've done the math to understand that if you grow from 5 roofs a week to 50, how are you going to pay for materials? Most people don't think about that.
It's where so many contractors get into problems. I think that it starts earlier in the process, though. And I know you see this on a regular basis too, but it starts even like the cash flow starts at the job costing, right? Like there's a lot of challenges in the way that projects get estimated, right? Like speak to that a little bit, like the job costing aspect of things.
Yeah, so this is really knowing your numbers. And this is probably like if you were to come back and scale back everything we've talked about, knowing how to run a business from the number view, your person who hired a fractional CFO off the gates is probably the smartest person that you've ever worked with, because they understand that the numbers have to work. And that means that I've always charged $500 a square to roof. Well, great, that's fine, but material costs have gone up, or your competitors are doing X, Y, and Z, or now maybe there's a different thing that you could do. I always just do ridge vent because it's the best thing to do, and I just include that in my bid. No, that's an upsell. That's okay. And most people know these things, but really understanding that you can't just rely on those old habits. You have to reevaluate every year. And some people are like, okay, I'm going to go 5. And again, if this is your area and you're like, wow, Nick, you're dumb. That's 500 square. This is an example. So that's okay. So say you said I've been doing 500 square forever, because when I did the math 3 years ago, 500 square gave me my 20 points at the end. Well, if I'm not redoing that every month, if I'm not pulling 10 folders out and and that's a minimum, by the way, if you're not pulling out and job costing 10 jobs every single month, you could slowly be trickling out. Like, I don't know what gas is like in your area. I don't know what additional surcharges are. Some material or some suppliers are charging more to roof load. Maybe your subs have got extra costs on them. You really have to understand, and you have to go through that exercise, and everybody hates it, right? Because I don't take pictures of my receipts. I leave them in there. They fly out of the truck, or my wife comes in and cleans out my truck. Sorry, Holly. And I've got all these receipts in there, and I'm like, crap, I think I spent like, that was $300 at Depot to go grab some extra stuff, or I had to run to ABC and grab X, Y, Z, whatever. You've got to understand that this job from start to finish cost me this. I've got to calculate my overhead and profit into that. And I got to understand that go backs cost a lot more. I'll go some places and they'll have the sales rep go out. Then they'll have an estimator go out, or a measurer go out. And then they'll have a different person, a production manager, go out to do the color meeting. And then they'll have a different guy go out to do day of install. And then they'll have another guy to come back and do the punch list. That's 5 trips that I've done on that job to that house. And if that's an hour away from me, I've got lost opportunity costs every step of the way. I've got my gas costs every step of the way. Could those people be doing more meaningful tasks instead of saying, all right, salesperson, you are responsible. I'm going to teach you how to do this extra step, or I'm going to teach you how to take these pictures, and I'm going to make it so that you get the colors at that meeting, because I don't want you to go back. And not because I don't want you to build that relationship. If that's part of your process, that's fine. But all of those things go into the job cost. So $100 each time you go out there, that adds up. So if I made $5,000 or $3,000, now I went out there 5 times. Well, now I made $2,500. You've got to start reducing all those things, because they actually cost and they actually take up time. And you'll learn that maybe you're burning through cash a little quicker than you anticipated. So at least 10 every single month. Pull 10 folders, job costs from start to finish, include cell phone, include insurance, include the bathroom cleaning supplies. Everything that you spend goes toward the job cost, because those are dollars that you're outputting, and those jobs have to help pay for it. So roll it all up, understand what it is, and really get into the details of your numbers.
That's great advice, because if that really allows you to know your numbers, right? That really allows you to dig in and continuously see. One of the things that you said there was opportunity cost. And I don't think that we really factor this in a lot of our day-to-day. It's like, if I wasn't doing this, what could I be doing? Like, if you're still selling for the company, or if you're going out and building relationships, or, could you have had a conversation with a supplier and renegotiated something, but you were on this job site doing something else? Like, if you could have ran another inspection or 3 other inspections in the time that it took you to go to Home Depot and get something and run it back, and like, there's opportunity cost in so much of this thing. So that's great, man. I love that you pointed a lot of that out. What are some of the things that you're seeing, from a macro perspective, maybe industry changes, things like that?
Yeah, interesting, because there's a lot of things that are going on. In Utah, there's been some really big changes with competition, right? It's really, really, really easy to get licensed in Utah. When I was getting my GC license, I had to, go through and provide 2,000 hours of W-2. You had to go through and show all these different things. They made a change where you can just check a box. Said, yeah, I have 2,000 hours, and you'll get audited and you'll get checked. I'm sure they do it. But there's a lot of people who are running and gunning. I go to a lot of states where there's no licensing involved. I think because of social media, because of podcasts like yours, people are really seeing that roofing, exterior, that trade work, maybe it's all trade work, right? We used to say, oh, blue collar's terrible. But now it's like, is college really worth it? This whole debate's going on, and people are starting to say, maybe I should get into the trades, because there's an opportunity to go and get quick and to be successful in a hurry. And so the competition is really, really growing, and the licensing is easier. Places where there's still states where there's no license. You might even need just a handyman license to do all this different work that we do. You have to really be involved in your area. We've got like the Utah Roofing Association here. There's lots of builders associations. There's BMI Group. There's all these ways to be part of the industry. And it's really important to understand that there might be some changes to 1099 coming up. What does that even mean? What's going to happen with legislation, not just in your area, but, federally wide?
Federally.
How's that going to affect my relationship with my subs? How's that going to affect my cash flow? How is that going to affect what I have to do? Because now I may have some more insurance burden, or I might have some other things that I have to make sure that I calculate in. And if I'm going to go vote against that, I need to know that that's even happening. I need to know when that vote is, and I need to make sure that the people that are representing me are going to vote the same way I'm going to vote. Other things that are kind of crazy is like, I spent a lot of time in Florida, working with roofing companies, because there's a lot of roofing in Florida. Storms are our best friends down there, which, is terrible to say, but they come through and give us a lot of work to do. But the insurance companies are like, man, we don't want to keep paying for all these roofs. So maybe some of the big guys are pulling back, or maybe they're changing the rules on how they'll offer coverage, and they're changing the ways on who can talk and how to talk about the coverage. And so you just have to be plugged in to understand that in every part of the country, there's going to be some sort of change. There's going to be something that's going to affect the way that you do business. And if you just kind of narrow down and I'm going to go do this, because that's what I've always done, you're missing out. And you're missing out on your voice being heard, because you're really not going to have the opportunity to go and say, man, I have to adapt because everything's getting quicker, everything's faster. And that means you're probably going to fall out of favor, or you're just going to kind of dwindle up or get smaller and smaller and smaller, because these other guys who are involved, they are engaged, they're working, they can do a lot more, and they will be a bigger voice, and they'll be able to adapt faster than you will.
Awesome, Nick. This has been another episode of the Roofing Success Podcast. If you would like to generate more revenue through your digital marketing efforts, please visit roofermarketers.com to get a copy of the book, The Best Known Roofer. Also, check the training section of the website for guides on everything from running effective pay-per-click ads to how to properly set up your Google My Business listing. Thanks for listening.